thinking about China as a source of all these products that come in. So when you go down to Walmart and you look around, it's all made in China. But in point of fact, for agriculture, China is now the #1 U.S. agricultural export market. 1985, it was the 33rd market, about 0.5% in terms of size. It was a market that you would measure in the millions of dollars, $149 million market. Today, it's the #1 market for the U.S. It's 25 billion. So it's gone from millions to billions. If you add Hong Kong to that, you can add about $4 billion to that. That's all happened in the last 25 years. All the discussion you heard earlier today about the development of this global middle class is responsible for that. The global middle class has shown up in China. It's probably today bigger than the entire population of the United States. We're on our way to, that's probably going to double in the next 25 years in China. The other significant thing, especially if you're in the food side, is China is going from being overwhelmingly rural. A generation, 2 generations ago, was 15% urban. It's already past 50% urban, and it's on its way to 85% urban by 2050. What does that mean if you're in the food business? It means that 85% can't grow their own food. It's got to come from somewhere. And you actually heard some of the, I think, discussion about Korea and how they're not self-sufficient for the most part. Well, same thing is happening in China as its population becomes urban. But because the middle class has developed and it's broadly spread, because of income, they can afford to import products. And those products, we'd like to say, are going to come from California. And that's what this panel is about. So that's the background in terms of that we're looking at, that the emergence of this huge market in terms of size and breadth, and we expect that to continue. Now our panel, we have a great panel here today, and I'll go quickly through the introductions. Terry Batch is the Senior International Trade Specialist Team Leader for the Global China team. And she's the lead, I guess I'll let Terry explain a little detail about that. But I thought I'd do, what's interesting about this panel is, that you almost never will see is you've got commercial counselor counterparts from 2 different countries, from the US and from China. So I think it's going to be great to get the insights from them as sort of counterparts to give you an idea of what's going on. So let's start with Terry, and I'll just do that, that'll be the short introduction, and let Terry introduce herself and talk about what she does.
Thank you, Robert. Again, my name is Terry Batch. I'm here in Los Angeles. I work in our West LA office. To those of you who are familiar with us, we have 2 offices in Los Angeles. We have a West LA office where we're off of Olympic Boulevard near the 405. And then we have an office in downtown LA where we're co-located with the Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation. And I just wanted to point out some of my colleagues that are here. Rashid Sayudi is the director of our downtown office, and I saw him a minute ago, but I think he stepped out. And then I also have a colleague, Maura Kawai, who is in our West LA office. And the way we are organized here locally as a resource for all of you is by industry sector. So I cover food products, and I cover a number of other industry sectors like building and construction and architecture, engineering, things of that nature. And Maura covers everything that deals with media and entertainment and education and training. So depending on the sector that you're specialized in, you would work with a different trade specialist. So I wanted to make sure I made that introduction so you guys know when you contact us, you will work with someone who specializes in your sector. And you happen to get me today, who I work with the food sector, and I also work with China. So you got a good deal here today. So I wanted to also talk about our offices in China. We have offices throughout China, so every major city that you're used to hearing, like Beijing and Shanghai. Some of you might know Guangzhou. We also have an office in Chengdu, which is inland. We have an office in northern China in Shenyang, and then we just opened an office in Wuhan, and then we have offices in Hong Kong as well. A unique thing that we have with China is we have a relationship with the Chinese government to help serve 2nd and 3rd tier cities. So in conjunction with our colleagues at CCPIT, we try to help U.S. companies that want to do business in places like Dalian or Qingdao or some of these other lesser known cities. And I really wanted to point out those lesser known cities because a lot of people, when they think business, oh, I want to go do business in China, and you go straight to Beijing or straight to Shanghai. But there's so many opportunities throughout China, and I want to kind of steer you away from those places to some of the other cities in China that has enormous potential. When you get your packets when you leave today, I included some information, just some briefs that our offices in China have developed, and it talks about some of the other cities like Chengdu or Shenyang or Wuhan, and the opportunities and what are the major industries there, what U.S. companies can leverage there. And it also has information by industry sector, where it looks at food and agriculture, and also the retail sector, and then e-commerce, which is also huge, and it's an area that we're tackling and working and leveraging a lot more with partners. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. Also, I know many of you are familiar that President Obama was just in China a couple of weeks ago, and there were 3 major agreements that were agreed upon, most of which don't necessarily apply to food and agriculture, but I wanted to just mention them because they're huge agreements that were agreed upon, and it really is going to set the stage, I think, going forward with our relationship with China. One is the climate change. I think a lot of you guys are familiar with that, and China's commitment to 20% of renewables by the year 2030. The other one is visas. It used to be that the Chinese could get a 6-month visa, 1 entry into the US. Now they're able to apply for a 10-year visas, multi-entry, which is huge for travel and tourism. So if you're looking at trying to sell to Chinese consumers, you don't even have to go to China to sell to them. You can sell to them right here because they're coming here, and they're coming here more. Right now, our offices in China process about 1.8 million visas. They're expecting that to go up to 7.5 million over the next 5 years. So that's something you can prepare for. The third agreement, which didn't get a lot of press, I didn't think, but I think it's huge, and it's in the information technology area, and that is that all of products in the IT sector are going to 0 tariffs. So, and that includes health IT, it includes a lot of different products. So that's another area to look forward. And with that, I'm going to end my remarks because I could talk. I think all of us can talk for days about China, but it is a tremendous opportunity. And if anything I can kind of stress upon and leave you with is to please use us. Use us as a resource. If you're going there, if you haven't met people on the ground there, please let us introduce you to them because they can be a wonderful resource as you conduct your business in the market.
Thanks. And next I'm going to introduce Councillor Haiyan Wu, who is Terry's counterpart. He's the Economic and Commercial Counselor for the People's Republic of China at the consulate here in Los Angeles.
My office covers the state of Arizona, New Mexico, Hawaii, and Southern California. And actually, although it's just 3.5 states, but we covered the most important states, and California. And in China, in the United States, we have the Ministry of Trade have 6 offices, including our office in the embassy in Washington, D.C., and 2 consulates in California, one in Los Angeles and the other one in San Francisco. The other offices in the States is in Chicago, Houston, and New York as our offices here in the States. We cover different areas. But our daily work is to kind of promote trade and investment. And nowadays we have more inquiries about investment actually from China. And it's totally different from the time when I worked here during my last term, some long time ago. And we have more and more kind of potential investors come to us to learn about the local investment environment. And I know that the local businesses are also interested in doing business or investing in China or sell to China. So I will welcome any questions from the audience about that. But before the time for other panelists, I want to give a brief introduction about the Chinese economy and the Chinese investment environment, just go briefly. And the Chinese economic slowdown has been kind of a headline for some global media these days. In the first 3 quarters of this year, the GDP growth is by 7.4%. That's kind of a slowdown compared with the double-digit growth. But still, I think it's a kind of healthy and robust growth compared with other major economies. China's economy is in a very kind of a critical stage at this moment. We are facing kind of a global, slower than expected growth in the global economy, and China is kind of a side effect of previous stimulus package need to be kind of digested, and so the growth rate for economic development is kind of moderated, but 7.4 is still healthy, and by the end of September, the Chinese economy have created 10 million new jobs. That's the target for the whole year at the beginning of this year. So the economy, I think, is still in a kind of a healthy and stable status. And the economy also kind of very dynamic. And take one example, the e-commerce. In China, we have a kind of actually called e-commerce day, or November the 11th. It's a kind of a culture called Bachelor's Day. On that day, everyone, young people, go online to shopping. And on that single day alone, with the Tmall, one e-commerce website by Alibaba, and together with Taobao, these 2 e-commerce websites have conducted the sales of $9.3 billion US. That's a single day. That's comparable to the Black Friday. And it's also a 63% increase. So that's one aspect of the economic dynamism. And the driver for the economic development is also changing. And in the past, investment has been the lead driver for Chinese economic development. But beginning from last year, consumption has been taking the lead in the economic, in the support of economic development. Now 50% of the growth comes from consumption. So and also that's the change. And also the private investment instead of SOEs have been kind of a strong driver for economic development. And now it's 65% of the economy, and the growth is 18.3%. It's the first 3 quarters. So it's kind of dynamic development, and in long term, and we have a bright future, I think, because China urbanization and industrialization, and also the development of modern agriculture will help the country to keep a robust growth. I will stop there, and I will discuss in details today.
Well, I wish we had 7% as our slowdown growth. If you look at the Chinese economic growth, which has really hovered around 10% for the last 25 years, never going into the negative, you can imagine if there was something, that GDP growth rate like that in the United States, the size of the US economy, we'd be talking about a different set of issues, I think, in the US. I think what I picked up in your report is something of significance, is growth in consumer spending in China, which is directly relevant to why we're here in terms of, as if there's a shift, if we already have this 25 billion in food and agricultural products going to China, and if there's a shift to increase consumer spending in China, hopefully in food products, then that's an even bigger market. So the economy may have slowed down some relatively from a double-digit level, but it looks like there's some shifts that are really opening up a more favorable situation. Next on our panel is Daniel Mosnet. Do I have that right? He's the Director of Marketing with Grower Direct Marketing, and he's someone from the private sector, so it's part of this nice mix. Grower Direct is a grower, shipper, packer of fresh cherries, walnuts, blueberries, asparagus. What are monster? Is it monster?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm reading this, and at first I thought it was monster cats, and I said, okay, what is that? And hard squash. Would you like to actually say a little bit about your company and what you're doing?
Absolutely. Grower Direct is the marketing division of our parent company, OG Packing. It's a fifth generation farming family from here in California, and we've been growing cherries and walnuts for a long time. We do a lot of business in China and Japan and Korea, and listening to a lot of the people that have been talking today. A lot of you guys, especially on the panel before, have probably forgotten more information about a lot of these markets than I know. So this has been a really great experience to be able to hear everybody. So thank you all for your expertise. Fresh cherries, which is really kind of the flagship of our company. We're one of the largest grower, shipper, packers of cherries here in California. Have a pretty robust business up in Washington as well. It's a commodity that you get really excited about. It kind of kicks off a lot of other people's seasons, fresh California cherries, but it does provide a lot of challenges as you get, your product landing overseas. You need to make sure that it's paid for. You need to make sure that it's picked up at the airport. You need to make sure that you have a cold chain all the way through. So there's a lot of really critical elements to it. Our friends over at Euler, we don't take one step in China without talking with these guys, and they've really been an excellent support system for us to really know who we're dealing with. A lot of these Chinese companies that we particularly deal with, there may be 5, 6, 7 different affiliates of their business. So really understanding who you're working with, where your product's going, controlling your brand in a marketplace is critical and crucial. Not making sure you don't have too many suppliers that are selling your brand in whatever market that you're in has been something that we've been dealing with for the last couple of years, and really trying to take a step back and eliminate some of those people that may not do as well with your brand as you'd like them to, and really fostering the relationships with others that do a good job. And not overcommitting to markets. So that's a little bit about what we do.
My understanding is this year the cherry crop was off. Is that due to the drought? It's my personal ag question.
It was, to be specific, it's the worst cherry crop in the history of California farming. So it was pretty bad. I'll call a spade. But really it was due to the warm winter that we had, we believe. Water really wasn't too much of an issue for us last year. Hopefully it won't be too much of an issue this year. But we had a really warm winter and didn't provide a great quality product to export overseas, which was very challenging for a lot of our customers.
Mm-hmm. And then next on the left is Jeff Williamson, who you've actually already heard from. But Jeff, did you want to add anything more? Any other comments?
Yeah, maybe a few. First of all, I just want to thank Robert, because he's really the one who started me on this path. He doesn't know it, but it was about 10 years ago when we started up that MOU with CDFA.
Yeah.
So we, the CITDs have been sort of working collaboratively with CDFA to roll out the WUSADA programs in the state. And so I've always kind of had one foot in it and kind of listening. And it's only recently that I started participating and actually promoting the sector much more. And the reason why I think this sector, looking that we serve multiple sectors in the state, whether it's aerospace or other ones, but particularly with China, is, we're looking at 10 years of double-digit growth of California exports to China. and also to Hong Kong more or less. I mean, but that whole region's been 10 years of double-digit growth in food and ag products. And what I see as being the real interesting part is that it has so much long-term growth potential because there's so many interesting sort of elements. One is that food, as compared to other products, has so many different channels, so multiple channels. It can be sold in multiple channels. The channels can be very fragmented, and so there's always an entry point for small companies. The other thing is that as far as a market entry for food products, is that as the buyers get extra money in their pocket, one of the first things they can really afford to do to show that they're global and to establish status with their friends is really easy to buy food products. You know, it takes a little while to change your wardrobe or your automobile or whatever, but the food product can be purchased very quickly, and people are always looking to try new things. So I think that, you know, these kind of things are really sort of driving the adoption rate of you know, imports from the U.S. And then, of course, the quality issues related to food security and other things, it definitely plays to advantage in the U.S.
Thanks. I'll take the responsibility, but not the blame. Gordon Hinkle is to Jeff's left. He's the Vice President of the California Center, and he leads the U.S. efforts for all operations and membership recruitment to the California Center. And I guess, would you like to explain a little bit about it?
Sure. Thanks, Robert. First, I wanted to say I'll thank you to the California Asian Chamber, where I was a team member for 3 years, and I think I was part of one of the original events like this that we did, I think, almost 3 years ago. And it's one of the hardest working teams, I think, anywhere in the state. The Cal Asian Chamber does a great job just informing businesses about the opportunity and the pitfalls to be leery of and the resources available. So I'm so excited to be here today as a panelist instead of a staffer working the event. So it's an honor to be here. But to explain what the California Center is, we are a platform for California businesses in China. If you have goods, products, or services that you're looking to showcase or introduce or increase your visibility, you need help with a certain aspect of your business, we're a resource for you. One of the great things about what we do is not only introduce you to potential Chinese partners and potential opportunity in China, but also to build a California network where California businesses are helping each other out, whether that's sharing containers to save on costs or to find a banking partner that they can rely on or legal services that they need. We bring all those resources under one house, and we have a physical showroom that we just opened in Shanghai May of this year, and very excited to have seen tremendous growth in just a 6-month period. We're very proud to have support from the governor originally who signed an MOU, our project, which is a private entity, not to be confused with a public entity. We are a private venture, but we have a lot of support from government, including the governor, I think at least 20 officials here in the state of California, because they realize the importance of exports for the state of California. So we do a lot of food and ag, export of wine. We're also introducing educational opportunity, going both directions. One of our most recent new members of the California Center is UCLA, where I'll be going after this meeting today to talk about their plans for 2015 in China. They will be using our new campus in Shanghai to showcase some of their offerings in education, whether it's classes or programs that they're doing. So that's very exciting for us as well. So I would encourage anybody who would like to visit the California Center when next time you go to Shanghai to look us up. We can arrange for tours just to meet the staff, see the facility that's available. We have a physical showroom that's absolutely beautiful, just like I said, just opened in May. We were lucky to have some members of the governor's team and the Cal Asian Chamber and a lot of representatives from here in Los Angeles on that delegation that was there for the grand opening. And it's an honor to be here today just to share what we're doing and to hear what some of our counterparts here that are doing great stuff in China to share opportunities and bring those to businesses.
It sounds like the California Center is a type of P3, a public-private partnership. Would that be a
That's a fair way to describe it. We are only a private company for profit, but we partner with, like I said, a lot of government agencies because we want to support what they're doing. And a lot of times we can provide support to businesses that they don't necessarily specialize in. So because we were signed in the governor's MOU in 2013, we've received a lot of support from the state.
And I think you may be seeing more of this P3 approach, particularly at the state and local level. It's actually a way of stretching public resources out with that kind of partnership. And then Winston Chu, you've been on all three panels.
Thank you. Always an honor. Our business with China grew 30% since 2007. You heard me sign an agreement with Bank of China Insurance Group back in 2007. And we also partnered with one of the largest Chinese insurance companies in China to identify the risk of not just big companies in Beijing or Shanghai, but also, like Terry said, those other regions. So Chinese partners, the customer with us doing business with China is so important and such a big part of our business nowadays.
Okay, great. Well, I have a whole list of questions or topics, and each one of them could be an entire afternoon. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read one at a time. I'm just going to read one, and then for the panelists, you don't all have to respond, but you can just chip in from your perspective, because I think this is the opportunity, because you've got this mix here on this panel to actually hear their different perspectives, even though they may not work specifically in that area. So the first one, and it fits in with the theme you've heard throughout the day in terms of the demographics going on. You've heard it about Japan, you've heard it about Korea, and I already talked about some about China in terms of the middle class and the urbanization of China. Are there other changes that you're seeing, particularly, say, the geographic part? I'm giving this off lead in, that you're seeing is something that should be noted? Sure.
Well, I just want to reiterate, and I think Winston touched on it a little bit, I think Americans, when we think China, we think Beijing, we think Shanghai, and that's where the majority of us go when we go to China. And I also think that when we think China, we think those two places, but we look at it as a country, and I think I want to encourage you to look at it as a region, because China's very fragmented, the distribution channels are fragmented. If you have a distributor in Shanghai, they're probably great for that region of Shanghai, the Shanghai Eastern region, but they probably don't know the inland, or they don't have the same connections or relationships inland or in the south. So I want to just encourage you to look at Guangzhou, look at Chengdu, look at some of these second and third tier cities where the population is more than 10 million people still. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity in those places. And because what happens is a lot of the foreigners have gone to Shanghai and Beijing, and it's very saturated. So to introduce a new product or to get a new idea going, it's gonna be way more costly. But if you go to another city where there's not as much access, or there hasn't been as much attention paid there, you'll have a warmer reception, and then you'll also have some opportunities that you might not have in Beijing and Shanghai. So I don't know if anyone want to add to that.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more Chinese consumers using their handheld devices for purchases. So thinking geographically, those geographic borders are changing with technology. And so we think it's very important for any business that's moving to the market, not just to look at websites and those type of platforms, but handheld devices are becoming a greater increasing part of the market in China. But talking about physical locations, big cities like Chongqing that people don't historically know about, but it's, I think, the biggest city in the world that no one talks about. There's tons of opportunity out west. Some of the cities that Terry mentioned, we are also looking at. Like I said, I think with a lot of new businesses, they should look at where they can go technology-wise to reach more of the consumers.
I think one thing we can't forget is the role that Hong Kong plays. Hong Kong is really, despite so many other areas in China growing so quickly, Hong Kong provides really a very unique platform. They provide this platform that enables people to tap in and localize their products very quickly, and a nice platform for marketing services, financial logistics services. And the reason I mention Hong Kong is because we've taken a lot of groups to Hong Kong, and a lot of new to market and new to export companies even. It's a good place, I think, for people to learn how to get a base hit. And they can get doubles and triples and maybe home runs, but for some companies that haven't been doing business in Asia or maybe in China before, China can be a little bit daunting in some cases.
Yeah, that daunting is definitely true. What's been said before for Korea and Japan, really depends on what your model is. If you're looking for 3 to 5 years of, hey, let's get in and sell as much as we can and get out, then maybe it doesn't matter as much. But if you've been around for 5 generations, you want to be around for 5 more, you really need to look to those partners that can help you. And it becomes a little less daunting when you can find those people that you can trust. And somebody said before, you got to get over there and have people there and interface, not just with emails and you're sending an email in the morning, they're sending an email at night. You never really have a chance to connect. You really need to physically talk, stay up till 1 in the morning, and have a couple of conversations, Skype, whatever it is, but really have that dialogue.
And can I just add one thing about the Hong Kong that Jeff mentioned? Locally, there's the Hong Kong Trade Development Council. I know Teresa's here, and I think Carmen was here. They're a great resource, and I think that, just to piggyback on what Jeff was saying, it's a great way to test your product. If you don't want to go to China, and it is daunting, you just kind of want to get your foot in the water, and Hong Kong is their rule of law and transparent and all those things that we think about when that fear of doing business in a place in China. It's a great place to go and see if your product would do well, taste-wise and things like that. So definitely consider that. They have a food show, I think twice a year, but in August of every year, we've always supported them in the California pavilion that they have. So definitely reach out to Teresa and their colleagues.
Let's talk about food retailing, because in China, supermarkets came to China basically early 90s, and they just took off, except for the supermarkets that had come over from sort of an extension from Hong Kong. But in the rest of the country, it really came about as actual native-grown supermarkets, as both a concept in terms of what a supermarket is with a variety of products, and also as a chain with multiple stores. And they've undergone this incredible growth rate, that percentage growth rate we probably haven't seen in the US since supermarkets first came about as a concept in the US. It's a similar comparison. Are there changes happening in the supermarkets that you see that are opportunities that make it easier to exploit for California products?
There are a lot of opportunities within some of the branded programs that that USADA offers. There are a lot of promotions that are able to happen. Our board, our Cherry Advisory Board, our export promotion board does a really good job of getting out and doing in-store sampling and demos and getting people to taste and experience. And a lot of the retailers, they love it. It really helps to sell product. So if you can get involved with some of those branded programs, if you can have that relationship where you can test a few things out in stores, it really makes a big difference. And it'll actually help you a lot in the online portion of it as well, because people can touch, taste, and feel your product, fall in love with it, and then they become a regular customer that just buys it all the time. And it's very similar to the in-store sampling and demonstrations here in the States. It makes a big impact.
I just wanted to echo what Daniel was saying. One thing that we're doing at the California Center is exactly that, is we're, the next facility that we're looking to build in Wuxi, will be a showroom that really highlights the product, but gives the customer an opportunity to then go online and visit that same experience online. So we're opening a couple of these stores throughout China, hopefully within the next couple of years, and it'll be a good place for California businesses to test the market. Not only that, but if they already have a product line that's going and want to go into new parts of China, there'll be an opportunity for them to expand. So that's our goal, is to utilize the storefront to then bounce into the e-commerce world as well.
Let's talk a little bit about logistics, because I mean, you've already heard that China is not a single market where there's one entry point to it. There's not the equivalent of like a Cisco where you can sell your food products to and get it distributed nationally. And you've seen the growth of supermarkets, and we've already had Terry's mentioned this geographical split across, where there's development in the interior cities that are often overlooked. Is that also a challenge, or is that an opportunity that you just got to find your logistical niche of how you get it from here to there?
I'll take a stab at it. Yeah, what we're finding is that every industry type has its own needs, and I think one of the hardest things is for companies that have cold storage needs, that don't know their logistics process. That's where we can come in and help and say, here's something you may want to consider. Here's how you may want to get your product there and have a place. If you know the timeline of the shelf life for your product, so that you can work out your business model. I think those are the considerations that are hard for new businesses in entering the China market, is to know exactly what that logistics timeline is going to look like from beginning to end. And so if you need help with those type of questions and finding the right partners, and then also getting the product to the customer may be the hardest part. Getting it from the port of Los Angeles or Oakland may be the easy part, getting into China, but then getting it to the customer, there's still a lot of infrastructure issues within China. So knowing who the good partners are, having reliable resources like the folks here on this panel who can advise, some folks to use, to partner with, I think is critical.
I look at the logistics question as one that's very much intertwined with the marketing question as well, because we're dealing with distribution, collection of payment, transfer of information, all of these things together. And one of the things that I've noticed over the past, I guess about 15 or 20 years I've been going to China, is that what we've seen is that we've seen a movement towards compartmentalization in every industry. That people that are working, for example, in the beverage industry, that's what they work in, and that's where they're moving. Instead of buying a whole range of products, people are able to focus and develop networks, logistical networks, for the distribution of coffee, for example, throughout China, the distribution of milk tea, the distribution of the Ferrero Rocher chocolates, or what have you. So these people, because the marketing infrastructure is rapidly developing, it provides the platform for them also to tap into that on a product by product and category by category basis. And I think the supermarkets help facilitate that too, part of your question.
Currently, logistics kind of cost has been comparatively high in China than in other developed countries. But the government has been pushing forward, trying to reduce the cost for logistics. And actually, just in this past November, China's Ministry of Commerce just promulgated a new regulation to try to facilitate the development of logistics and the kind of distribution services. And another development is that we try to facilitate trade through streamlining the administration cost. And one example that in the customs service, we have the there's a system that a foreign seller, a foreign company who want to sell their products to China can register their website with the Chinese customs, and then the customs, the Chinese customer can just register, get online, pick up their items and fill in their delivery address and then wait for the delivery in 2 weeks. That's the pilot program. I think that will actually in this past Black Friday kind of shopping spree, a number of Chinese e-commerce kind of websites have that kind of arrangement. Yeah, that's one way. Thank you.
Well, you mentioned e-commerce, so that's a nice segue. I was going to toss a question out, but you've heard about the other two countries, the development of e-commerce, whether it's an Amazon-like approach or whether it's just off of their phones, which I thought was kind of interesting. So what do you see in terms of China, in terms of e-commerce for product coming from here to there?
Obviously, people are following the Taobao as what, a $300 billion sales level already, which is more than twice the size of Amazon. So it's already the largest online retail in the world. We're seeing, what I think is very interesting actually is that, we have some of these institutional voids, particularly in developing markets, whereby they're not like product support systems. So you have a situation where, say, a consumer buys something, they pay cash, they have no recourse if it doesn't work. They have no way to rate and compare sellers. A number of issues related to just the product integrity and the exchange. And I think what really has some of these issues are being solved in the online marketplace. Rating of sellers, display of information, and the ability for the consumers to look at many different products and compare. But ultimately, one of the things that I think is really interesting is that when you look at the when you consider the I just lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me in a second.
Okay. Well, let's talk a bit about Chinese consumers, because we've heard about consumers in Korea and Japan, and we've heard a common theme of discussion about market for organics. So for China, I guess the one question would be, is there a similar market there? The second part of that question would be, how are organics defined? Is it the same thing as here? Or is it more of a concept? And then the third would really be, are there any trade issues in terms of organics? Because I know there are standards, each country has different standards, and they're not for organics, and they are not necessarily the same.
As far as organics go, I can't really talk to that too much because we don't deal too much in organics specifically, but along the same lines, quality of product is extremely important. LD, you guys were dealing with high quality product. If you have that high quality product, even if the market is tough, what we've been able to find, at least on the cherry side of things, is you're going to be okay. Your product's going to sell and it's going to move, and it's going to move quickly. But as soon as your product takes a little bit of a dip, and with fresh produce, invariably you're always going to have something that arrives less than what you would want it to arrive, and less than the condition you'd like it to arrive. And that is the product that will sit and stay, and that's when you really need to have that relationship with your importer to make sure that it doesn't hurt your brand as much as it could. And there's some sellers out there that don't necessarily understand that concept, and it really hurts the entire industry. So those are some key things. Quality of product, to me, is a lot more important than being able to offer organics.
I apologize for the brain. I'm getting older. I'm a horse this year. Anyway, what I think is the interesting part for the online selling system is they seem to have somewhat solved a problem, or at least there's a discussion about solving a problem. That a lot of retail companies, and I deal with people like that sell shoes and other things, that when they go into China, they want to control the distribution, because a lot of the consumers, because there are people that are going to make products very similar brand-wise and so on and so forth, that they want to control the distribution. They tend to focus on building out owned retail systems so that this sends a signal to the consumer that this is the authentic product. This is the exact product you're getting. And that's what I thought, this has been the big push with Taobao, is they said, look, we can set up these systems now whereby if you agree to put your products directly onto Taobao as a branded company, then we'll make sure that nobody else can offer that product on our platform. And so they're trying to enhance that, authenticity, message that supports the branding. So I think they're solving some of those problems, and that was my comment. Sorry, Robert.
No, that's fine.
I wanted to echo again what Daniel was saying. I think that the phrase organic isn't as important as the quality and the safety. What we're finding is that the consumers that we talk to, they want safe, reliable products. So one of the things that we're doing is putting into place traceability mechanisms for the product from beginning to end, which I think, again, showcases the quality, showcases the safety component. A lot of you probably read about the scares in recent years and those type of things, that when Chinese visitors come to California, they're packing their suitcases with baby food and different items. Well, that creates an opportunity for California business to do a better job of finding ways to get those products into their hands in a reliable, safe, and traceable way. And then also to use those same traceable techniques to prevent counterfeiting and those sort of things.
I think a lot of times we think UPS, FedEx, DHL, the major shippers, when you get ready to ship a product. But there are a lot of niche service providers, probably some of which are in the room, that can help you to not only get your product to the port and get it on the ship, but also help you with those distribution points in China as well. So I would encourage you at the beginning of your process, when you're getting ready to sell to China or anywhere else, to make sure you do your due diligence and to find the right shipper and someone who's going to be with you and that's going to help you to whether it's China where everything is fragmented or other places that have better distribution. So I just wanted to put that out.
Okay. We had an incident about a few months ago. I think it's Dan's neighbor. They sell animal feed to China. Okay. However, the whole shipload of corn got stopped because the GMO standard is different. Okay. So great with our services, not only we help you to grow sales and protect your receivables, we also cover political risk. So this way we paid our policyholder $4.2 million, and we redirect the ship to either Japan or Korea and resell it. But I think eventually it resolved.
There's a great controversy in China whether the GMO food is safe. It's kind of something up to date. And one very famous news anchor, come to the United States with his team and did an investigation, kind of extensive interview of government officials and experts and consumers, and the conclusion is pretty different from the kind of official position. And consumers have different views in China, but the organic products in Chinese retail stores are, I think now it's really kind of for the high-end consumers. People who have the money to buy more expensive products will pick that well. But for average consumers, food safety is still a major concern as long as it's safe. But they're concerned about GMO and compared with the safety itself, whether it's kind of harmful to health. It's kind of GMO is a kind of lesser concern compared with safety. And I want to respond to the issue that Benjamin raised about the GMO products kind of get detained in Chinese port. I think right now between the United States and China we have kind of agreement that the authorities will sign, USD and Chinese Ministry of agriculture or the AKSIQ design protocols for what kind of product will be allowed to portray. But for those that are not on the list, that are without the protocol, that will be stopped on customs. But so we need to make sure that that kind of the product we want to ship to China is kind of up to the standard, up to the agreement.
Probably the best way to summarize that is that China, as with all countries where there's trade, there's a certain amount of trade friction that's going on, and it's you could say it's part of the normal process, but it's there and has to be worked
Can I
through.
just mention one thing?
Mhm.
Actually, this month in Chicago, I know Holly had referred to it, but Secretary Pritzker will be meeting with her equivalent, the minister, I can't remember, in Chicago. They're going, I'm sorry, the JCCT, which is when our government gets together with the Chinese government and they discuss these issues. And two of the issues relating to food is beef, U.S. beef exports to China, and also GMO products. So sometimes during these negotiations, these discussions, they come to agreement or it gets tabled for later discussions. But that is an ongoing area that the U.S. and China are trying to work out.
The group can maybe address some of the challenges that are out there, whether it's intellectual property rights and counterfeiting, or protecting your brand, or the customs issues of transparency, and just sort of like go through and give your comments.
As it pertains to intellectual property rights, we do have a lot of resources to help U.S. companies doing business in China. We have what we call the IPR attorneys that are located in our offices in China. I believe there's one in each office, each of the major offices. And then there's a website called stopfakes.gov. And on that website, there's an IPR toolkit. So it kind of walks you through the steps you need to take in order to protect yourself. And then there's also an agreement that Commerce Department has with the American Bar Association to help connect you with at least 1 hour of free legal advice as well. So all of that information is found on that website of stopfakes.gov. So just want to put that out there.
We help a lot of our members do is with their labeling process. If they're new to China and they haven't gone through that, making sure that their label is represented in a way that's acceptable in China for the shelf and for consumers. That can be a daunting process, especially like for wineries who haven't gone through that and they want their labels to be presented a certain way. So that's definitely a challenge. But then also, I think utilizing the number of resources that were talked about today and doing your homework ahead of time before you try to enter the market is going to be critical for new businesses, and just understand what those pitfalls are before you take leaps. Make sure you've done your research and your homework.
IPR has been one of the top priorities for U.S. right holders while they are doing business with China. And in China, the IPR is relatively a new kind of topic. Maybe in the past 30 years, China just established the IPR protection system. But we are making very fast progress. But since we have a huge population, the progress may not be as fast as people may expect. But the Chinese government is kind of very resolute in pushing forward this IPR protection. And protecting IPR is the national policy. And we want to build a country of innovation. And without IPR protection, that's not possible. And we are having extensive dialogue with the US, with the EU, with other developed countries to kind of improve the IPR protection system. And one major step is to kind of improve the transparency of the IPR protection system, the legal system, the court system for protecting IPR. And recently, we establish a special court for IPR. That's the latest development. But that shows, that's an indication of China's kind of the determination in pushing forward the IPR protection. But whenever you have a complaint, just file it with the Chinese, either the administration, the relevant authorities, or file a case with the court. You're welcome to do that anytime. Yeah.
I think we should try to get some questions from the audience here. We only have, I don't know, I think 10 minutes left. Yes, over here.
When a company comes into us and says that we have organic products, we don't stop there. We tell them to get third-party certification. Then we have it, and they have it. Because so many of the companies nowadays all over the world, oh yeah, it's easy to talk, but then it's not organic. You're getting stung over and over and over.
There are many different standards. The U.S. standard for organic was developed about 25 years ago. The Canadian standard about 10 years ago. And the Canadian standard is not the same as the U.S. standard. The EU standard is, again, another standard. It's not exactly the same. So part of the challenge is you could have a certificate that meets the U.S. standard, will not meet the EU standard. So on the trade policy side, there actually is discussion about getting an equivalency agreement between various things if you have trade that goes on in a third country. So it's actually fairly complicated, this whole idea of what organic is, and from a legal standpoint in terms of defining it. You can talk to organic groups, and there's a whole range of discussion as to what is and they think is and isn't organic, because some organic groups don't think the U.S. legal standard, but what they think is organic, it's not organic from their perspective. So it's quite controversial from that standpoint. It means a lot of employment for attorneys, I think, there. Are there any questions on this side? Okay, I'm going to throw out, since I get to be, usually I usually am the receiver of all these questions. And so I kind of describe sometimes my job as being the baseball catcher, because I have to catch everything that's thrown at me. Today I get to throw the pitch. So my wild pitch today is going to be in terms of China. And actually, someone earlier asked about services as an export. So I want to throw out the wild pitch question, which may or may not fit for what you guys are doing, is what about tourism? Tourism from China. Because I know that tourism from China in a large way started off in 2007 with an MOU opening the door for more tourism. And the numbers that I saw was that in 2008, Chinese tourists spent $3.5 billion in the U.S., an average of $7,200 per visit, and staying an average of 23 nights. That's more than almost any other international tourist. International tourism is tourism in general is a $100 billion business in California, contribution to the California economy. In some of the counties, like where Yosemite National Park is, tourism accounts for 50% of the income and 50% of the jobs, and tourism-related jobs. So this new Chinese middle class, they're coming here. There's two ways to export the food. They come here and they eat it in California restaurants and take it home in their stomach, or maybe take home a souvenir of California wine, and then you've created the market for once they're back, if they want to continue with that California lifestyle, is they've got to go to the store or order it by e-commerce. What do you think?
Well, Robert, I'm glad you asked. Well, this is something we've been looking at closely at the California Center, because we're getting ready to launch our e-commerce platform. And one of the things we've been talking about doing is a point system where we're wanting to sell the California lifestyle to the Chinese consumer. So that might mean working with some of our existing partners that have cruise lines or tourism to Hollywood or Disneyland or different giveaways that promote tourism within our e-commerce. So we're doing a lot of cross-promotional events, also with the entertainment industry. We've been talking to folks at Warner Brothers, folks at Disney, about getting involved in these type of cross-promotions where if you do an event in China to promote a food, can we also be promoting your latest movie in conjunction with that food, and doing a lot of those efforts together to brand California in tandem together. So I think there's huge opportunity there with tourism, especially with the growing middle class and with the natural tie to California. They want to come, Hollywood and Disneyland and San Francisco and Yosemite. I mean, we have a beautiful state, and the Chinese already identify greatly with California, so we can do more to capitalize on that.
In China, there's a program called Brand USA, and they work with cities and states and just different locations to help promote that to Chinese tourists. So you can Google them, Brand USA. They have all sorts of programs of promoting USA as a destination. So, and I think also when you think about travel and tourism, you also have to think about education and training too, because there's a lot of Chinese students that come here and come to school, and we also consider that an export. So there's a lot of ways to reach that Chinese consumer, like I said before, without ever even leaving the U.S., because they are coming to our shores.
I know that Visit California did a beautiful event in Shanghai that not only showcased the tourism opportunities, but how to pair wines with the foods, and then did a whole California flavor experience. That's kind of what we're trying to echo continuously, is providing that whole California experience, whether it's the food, how it interacts with the culture, how it interacts with the entertainment. And then they also did some really cool stuff, which I think we can all learn from, is promoting on social media, the giveaways. Like, I think they got thousands of hits because they did this one event, and the winner was going to get a trip, I think, to LA and visit Hollywood. And they literally on that night got, I think, over 10, 15,000 hits on social media, introduced to Visit California and the tourism. And I know LA Tourism recently was with Mayor Garcetti on his trip promoting everything that LA has to offer.
I think tourism has been the fastest developing business between China and the United States. Last year, commerce statistics show that 1.8 million Chinese visitors take the United States as their first stop for overseas trip, and that contributed a lot to the U.S. economy. And this year, 2014, we are expecting a growth rate of over 20%, maybe over the number will be over 2 million. And among all the visitors from China, about 45% will stop in California, and basically it's Southern California. I know they will stop sometimes in San Francisco, but
somewhere in Orange County they want to go.
yeah, right. And about 57, let me see, 570,000 Chinese visitors visited Southern California last year. And this earlier this year in the summer, there's a huge delegation, 7,000 Chinese visitors in the group organized by a kind of direct selling company and a kind of bonus for their employees. For every person, we spend about over $10,000, and the biggest single purchase is 2.7 million in a store. That one heard from South Coast Plaza. So you cannot underestimate their buying power. But I think how we can take the opportunity. Right now, Visit California and the Los Angeles County, we have their marketing offices in China, and the Los Angeles Convention Center and tourism office. They have their first, I think it's the first Chinese website marketing every city, every county. That's a great job. And during Mayor Garcetti's visit, we have the city and 5 medical institutions have an agreement to develop the kind of medical tourism from China to the city, to the area. I think that's great. And also, when you at the business community are thinking of taking advantage of the visitors, I think you can work with the travel agents and the tourism organizations. During the process of planning their kind of itinerary, I think maybe you can stop in Napa Valley or South Coast Plaza. That's up to discussion. So just invite them to your area. Thank you very much.
So, I mean, you can see the dynamics of the market. We could go on, you know, in any one of these three countries and talk all day on it. And I guess we're finished, or I'll leave it to you to finish up.